This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer at fansided.com. I'm joined today by a guy who wants to mini golf at Captain Stew's, who tried to be recruited by the cult of Zoltan and didn't do it, and has a difficult time ordering Chinese food at Chinese food. Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com. Dude, where's my car? How are you?
What's mine say, man? I'm doing good, man. What a classic movie. I mean, it is exceptionally stupid, but God, it is funny every single time.
It's amazing. Like if they ever made a movie starring us, it'd basically be that.
100%. Yeah. Just that's just Tuesday in our world.
Yeah, obviously today we're going to be talking about Carson, Beck, and Hannah Cavinder losing cars and stuff. It's going to be part of the show. Not going to be the lead topic, but it's going to be a couple topics.
It's got to be. Why? I mean, how could it not be? We're in the middle of the college football off season, and you get your Lambo stolen. It's gonna make the show. I promise.
All right, I got a couple of things for you to get started here. So we do use Shibby a lot in the channel with the red card
Yeah.
because it's a fun way to say yes or cool.
Cool beans.
Have you ever had your car stolen?
I have never had my car stolen. I've had things stolen out of my car, but not my car itself stolen. What about you?
Kinda. I have had stuff stolen out of my car.
Yeah.
Funny story. So, probably like a week or two into pledgeship, I was trying to park my car. They say park it on this side street and then walk over to the house. You can't park at the house for your pledge, which that makes sense. And I go back to look at my car, couldn't find it. I freaked out. And I called the cops. I'm like, yeah, I think my car has been stolen. We went to go look for it. It was literally a block away from where I was. I felt like such an idiot.
Oh no. That's
Like it's maybe 500 feet away from where I was looking.
who among us hasn't been there? My worst like car story was I went up to see some people at East Carolina. Shouts to Greenville, North Carolina, just a beautiful place when you're in college. And I was unaware of ECU's like football day rules and what parking lots were off limits and whatnot. So I parked in one of the lots where they tailgate in. And it was like that parking lot specifically, you didn't park and tailgate, you parked somewhere else, then you brought your tailgate gear there, and it was just kind of the tailgate parking lot. Well, I didn't know that. And so I wake up on Saturday morning and I'm like looking for my car and I'm like, well, there's a tailgate there. I couldn't have parked there. They would have told me I couldn't park there. And so I walked around for an hour looking for my car. Then I go back into the tailgate and I'm walking through. My car's just sitting in the middle of this tailgate for the entire time. So I had to wait until the game started before I left.
That's my education. Oh my God. And then obviously I remember the time that like I was the dog sitting the dogs and the power went out and it's like locks you inside. And one of the keepers from the Continuum Transfunctioner who definitely lives in Midtown Georgia just opened the door.
Of course
So,
he does. Yeah, I mean that's a Midtown guy if I've ever seen it.
carrying two little dogs in a dog bed. And this guy's just looking at me like we're the weirdest people on earth.
Oh God, shouts to Zoltan.
Shouts to Zoltan. I think my dad actually used to work with Hal Sparks' dad back in the
We're
day.
incredible stuff. I mean, would not surprise me at all. Hal Sparks, what a guy.
Yeah, he'll probably tell me after seeing the show. He's like, "Yeah, I do know like Hal Sparks' dad." He's like, "Yeah." It's
Oh, you mean Sparky Sparks? I know him well.
And I don't know if Hal Sparks knows anything about college football, but we've clearly false started. So we're going to go to our first and 15 with playoffs. You kidding me? We might be seeing the end of the four highest ranked teams getting shoehorned into a first round bye as soon as this year. Of course, everybody involved with the college football playoff, all the conference commissioners, and I think the chancellor of Notre Dame. I don't know. I think it's People Vokowitz, the president. I'm blanking on his name or whatever. But they have to be. It has to be like universal agreement of all 10 parties for
Yeah.
them to get rid of this. And obviously, Notre Dame would be in favor of this because like they don't care because whatever. But like I
I mean,
think
it does give them the like Notre Dame should be an easy yes because this gives them the opportunity to be a top four seed. Where right now in the current format they don't have that. So like Notre Dame, like he's probably it's first off it's Robert Dowd I believe is the name. That's the
yeah,
guy who I just looked up. And but like Dowd probably is like sitting in the corner smoking a stogie because everyone knows he's already a yes. You don't got to convince him about this.
No, I mean it's. Do you think it would get universal appeal, or do you think there'll be some pushback?
I think, honestly, no, I don't think there's going to be pushback. There should be if you're the Big 12 or the ACC, because this is clearly like not meant to benefit them. However, the Big Ten or the Big 12 and the ACC have been pretty spineless through a lot of these negotiations. So, like, that's why I have a hard time seeing there being any real pushback because they're just honestly, it feels to me a lot of the times when you get into these big power negotiations that the Big 12 and the ACC, they're just looking for any crumbs that they can get. They're not worried about getting the biggest slice of the pie.
Yeah, I think that like you're totally right there. It's kind of spineless. I think that they would advocate for if we were a top four conference champion,
Yeah.
then we get a home game.
Yeah, and I think that's completely reasonable. Like, don't you? Like, I think like you have to be a top 8 seed, but you may not get the bye in the 12 team format. Like, that makes way more sense.
Okay, so yeah, I think that that's way more reasonable. Maybe that's what they're demanding. Obviously, it feels like we're heading more towards more playoff expansion
Yeah.
because the Big Ten, the SEC want more money, and yeah, they didn't
Yep.
get all the money they wanted with Notre Dame going so far.
Yeah, shouts to shouts out to our boy Robert Dowd, who's just counting his checks after the first 12 team college football playoff.
But like this is like the first bit, like going through the jargonese of last week. I'm like, I can't read all this. I saw this with I guess Yahoo had this out, and I'm like, okay, I can actually understand what's going on here,
Yeah.
which makes me believe that it's more likely to happen because it's so simple.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we talked about what the field would have looked like this year had we had this system where, the top 4 seeds are the ones who get the buys, not the top 4 conference champions. And frankly, it looks like a lot better bracket, a bracket that makes more sense because what's the point? Like, honestly, I reached a point watching the college football playoff rankings, and obviously we were reacting to them and talking about them and stuff. But at the same time, I did reach a certain point where I was like, what's even the point of these rankings right now? Because everything's going to get jumbled up with the seeding, and like it certainly did with Boise State and Arizona State being in the top 4 seeds. Like you're jumping teams. So like, what really is the point of these rankings overall if we're not going to have a tournament that's seeded based on the rankings? At that point, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, maybe that would address some of the concerns I have about the buys with the momentum because Boise State, Arizona State were pushed up.
Yeah.
That gave teams like Oregon and Georgia a much more difficult first or quarterfinal opponent. Like instead of playing, Georgia's playing Notre Dame instead of playing someone like SMU or Indiana.
Yeah, and like in Oregon's case, like you're not like awaiting the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Like that's not a thing that you're doing in that situation. And like to a certain extent, like if you want to be a national champion, beat the good teams that you have to play.
Right.
Like that Ohio State did that. Ohio State played Tennessee. Like we looked at Ohio State's path when the playoff field got announced, and we were like, "Holy hell, they've got a gauntlet to run if they're going to do this." And they ran it pretty damn seamlessly. So like you look at like there is that portion of it, but at the same time, like you do want to reward a number 1 seed. Like that's why when the NCAA tournament in basketball comes around, there's always the 1 seed who the first one of the first conversations that they have on the CBS or ESPN broadcast is which 1 seed has the toughest path because as a 1 seed you're supposed to be at least somewhat rewarded with a bit like the easier path. That doesn't mean you can just cakewalk through it. That's never going to mean that. These are the 12 best teams in college football. It's the 68 best teams in college basketball. But at the same time, you do want to reward those teams for their body of work. And like I feel like the with the way the current buy structure was, if we go to this new one, it'll be much more rewarding to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was also thinking about this because like the bracket got so lopsided. They're like, man, Oregon's got to play Ohio State immediately or something like that.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this and I've never verbalized it. Maybe we'll go there as like a result of this. I think there is a chance that maybe Penn State's playoff run got artificially inflated.
I mean, it's entirely possible because you look back at their path was not the
Yeah,
most difficult thing in the world. Like you got to play
no.
SMU, you got to play Boise State, and then you lost to Notre Dame. Like that was your playoff run. And granted, they played Notre Dame extremely well. Like that was a good game. They probably should have won that football game. But there is a world where that did get inflated. I will say the one thing that makes me at least believe a little bit more in what Penn State is capable of is I thought I went into the playoff with the preconceived notion that both Boise State and Arizona State were going to kind of be exposed a little bit after getting the bye because I kind of to this conversation, like they were not a top four seed. They just happened to get a top four. They were not a top four ranked team. They just happened to be a top four seed. And so I thought that they would both get exposed. Arizona State did not. Boise State threw their best punches at Penn State, and Penn State just absolutely annihilated them. So like to that effect, like I do have a little bit more respect for the Boise State win than I probably would have thought going into it.
Yeah, and then like Georgia was just completely cooked in physically. And the
Yeah.
only one that looked really bad in this was Oregon. Oregon looked really bad.
Yeah, or Oregon got their they got their face stomped in, and that's never really what you want in these situations. As the
Quack
number one
quack.
seed.
No, number one. The Schmitty Werberman Janssens of the college football
Yeah, yeah,
playoff. He
yeah.
was number one. He didn't live very long, but he was number one.
He was always number one, man.
Any other thoughts with this? This is I'm glad that this is going to happen because like the playoff, I feel like if you have the TV partners, whatever it is, you have to basically air it wherever it is. But like if there's things where you can adjust it, everybody kind of agrees, like be adaptable. We don't need to keep running it back and diminish your product. If this is clearly like flawed,
Yeah.
um, just make a change.
No, and I also think that the more, excuse me, the more I think about this, though, I do also wonder if this will benefit the teams from the ACC and the Big 12 who aren't top four ranked going into the seeding, like who don't get that bye as long as we have the 12 team playoff. Because when you think about a Cinderella story, when you think of an NC State from last year in March Madness, like the biggest thing that they had going for them was they got hot and they got the opportunities. We see a first four team every single year. It feels like go on a run to the Sweet 16. And that's that momentum of maybe you're not as talented as the team across from you. You're not as good as them, but you get that belief going. You get to playing to your ceiling. There's a chance this other team's not. Whereas I feel like Boise State and Arizona State, they were somewhat like I would really want to see, especially based off of what Arizona State did against Texas after the bye. Like, I would be interested to see what Arizona State could have done had they not had that bye, had they gotten to play a first round game and seeing like what kind of momentum they could have built. Because coming out of the regular season, they had a hell of a lot of momentum, and I do wonder if some of that got thwarted a little bit.
I think that's totally fair. I guess like the last thing I thought about is like the NCAA tournament, March Madness is like the perfect blueprint for how to do this. They've been doing this for what, decades. Like
Forever, man.
you can learn from this and apply whatever works there here. I mean, there's things in like professional sports where it's like they still don't have it figured out.
No.
And like I think maybe the NBA has changed it a little bit where it's like you win your division, you get the home field advantage, which I don't think is the same sort of thing. That was kind of wonky there for a while.
Yeah.
NFL, obviously, they reward it for winning your division. Still, for the most part, it seems to level out in the end there. It's never really been the end of the world there. But
Yeah.
like, I think if it's clearly flawed and everybody we deal with the same thing again, and we have some 10 seed winning the tournament, we're gonna be like, that's there's something off here. Why is that happening?
Yeah, like there's a clear flaw in the system, and like you bring up a good point about March Madness being the blueprint because yes, you do get Cinderella runs to the Final Four. Yes, you get Cinderella runs sometimes to the national championship game, but it's pretty rare that we see like a Cinderella national champion itself. Like we just don't see that too terribly often. Like the last one I can feasibly remember would be Butler. Like no, Butler didn't even win the national championship. They
No,
lost. So like yeah, like you just don't see Cinderellas win the national championship, which to me is a sign of a good tournament. Like Cinderellas are fun during March Madness, but like you want the best, you want to determine who the best team is, and most of the time March Madness ends up doing that.
yeah, I mean, like the best examples of this was like Kimball Walker, UConn,
Yeah,
three seed.
yeah,
They just caught hot in the eight or the Big East tournament back then. I mean, way back in the day, probably Villanova with like Raleigh Massimino,
yeah.
but that's also
That's
Villanova. That doesn't, it's like it's a blue blood, like it's built to do this.
and it
Like,
was also that was a smaller tournament back then too. That was before it
mhm.
expanded to even 64 teams. So like, we like the more chaos you throw into it, like I think the more that water still is going to find its level. Like you have to win 6 games to win a national championship, and that's assuming you don't start in the first four. So like there's a lot that goes into it.
I guess to tie a bow on this, it's like even Ohio State was like the 8 seed, like they're
Yeah.
built for it. Like they were underseeded in this tournament. They should have been the 6th seed. And
Yeah.
so they're built for it, and like they have the ability to do it. Programs like that and any college level like could conceivably do it. But one program that's not built for it is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. You're doing great, sweetie. Man, I'm so out of Nebraska. Everything I've been seeing about them this offseason from Dylan Raiola masquerading with Patrick Mahomes' haircut.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's some it's some SFW SWFing.
Yeah, let's be clear. Like I've convinced myself that the reason Patrick Mahomes cut his hair is he was like, I've got to get this Nebraska kid the hell away from
Yeah, I think
me.
you could do a restraining order like Donnie the Seed Sadowski, but like that works. But so the first of two things we'll talk about Nebraska, maybe three, is they're canceling their home and home with Tennessee.
Mhm,
It's too late in the cycle, so essentially like they're paying Tennessee to get out of this.
mhm.
And this is such a bad look. This isn't, and for the record, this is not like Georgia and Oklahoma having theirs canceled because they were joining the SEC at the same time. They both
Right.
want to play. This is like this is I think it was like what Alabama and Texas beforehand. Like this was scheduled before Texas joined the league. Nebraska and Tennessee aren't ever going to be in the same league.
Right.
These are two traditional powers. They're essentially mirror images of themselves in the Big Ten and the SEC. This is a great helmet game, and I think we as fans lose that this isn't happening.
No, excuse me. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat this morning. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, and when this was first reported that this series was being canceled, it was reported as Tennessee and Nebraska have agreed to, cancel this series. And then Tennessee athletic director Danny White comes out and says, absolutely not. That's not what happened here. That's Nebraska wanted out of this game. And Nebraska, I believe, is paying 500,000 a game to Tennessee to buy out of this. And like what's there's no reason for this other than like it I honestly can't think of a justifiable reason why you would think this would be a good idea if you're Nebraska because if you're Matt Rhule, you're trying to make this program respectable. Okay, now it looks like you're ducking one of the best teams that's going to be in your schedule. Your opportunity to prove yourself. These games would be played with Dylan Raiola in theory. So like you're not going to be at a talent disadvantage. You're going to have a former 5-star quarterback leading the way onto the field. Like I just if you're Nebraska and you want to be taken seriously, I don't know how you can do this and then look yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm a serious person.
I mean, Troy Dannon he's probably going to leave for another job here. People are just leaving. Like honestly, with Trev Alberts leaving his alma mater, yes, I know A&M has more resources, but like you're really going to leave like for
Yeah.
this. But I guess to really look at this is so the Big Ten is going to be playing non-conference games. The SEC is probably eventually going to get there.
Mm,
They're going to basically college football is going to break the will of the ACC and the SEC to do that.
yeah.
But one of the biggest reasons why they don't is because there's 4 crossover games between the ACC and SEC during Thanksgiving week that they're just never going to get rid of.
Right.
So, for example, like Georgia is going to play Georgia Tech every year. Clemson's going to play South Carolina. And those are Power Four games on the schedule. So you've got your A conference games and then you got your ninth.
Yeah.
Well, there's also years where Georgia plays Clemson or Georgia plays somebody else substantial.
Yeah.
Nebraska's kind of doing they're not even doing what Iowa is, where Iowa's like, well, we got to play Cyhawks, so we've got a Power Four game there with Iowa State of the Big 12. It's like we don't have room for it. There's no
Yeah.
room in this.
We've also got to play Northern Iowa. So like what the hell else are we gonna do?
And then also it's like, what's the thing? You're like looking at it from the perspective of, oh, we're trying to get one more easy win so we can make the playoff. At this day and age, like it's not going to be that punitive. Just find a way to win 9 or 10 games in the Big Ten. You're going to be okay.
How many times watching the college football playoff selection show did we hear about strength of record? Like, how many times did we hear them talk about that with Indiana? Indiana, a team that ran the table up until they met Ohio State. All we heard about was strength of schedule, strength of record. We even heard that after they lost to Ohio State and finished the season 11-1. Like, strength of, like, this isn't. This isn't 1975 Nebraska. Like we're not running by the same parameters. Like you can't just go 12-0 against a bunch of nobodies and have no one notice that anything other than the zero in the loss column. Like, yes, if you go 12-0, you're probably making the college football playoff. I'm not denying that. But at the same time, you might like unless you win the Big Ten championship game, like you're not going to be the number one seed at 12-0 if your schedule is absolute ass. Like that's just not going to happen.
Another example, SMU, like they didn't really have a win of significance in the ACC. Their one loss during the regular season was to BYU by like a score.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, like everybody used that game as like giving credit to the Mustangs for keeping it that close with BYU, a team that would have made the playoff if it would have been a 14 or 16 teams with the second AQ spot going to the Big 12, which would have been BYU over Iowa State. Probably wouldn't have been if they would have actually taken it
Right.
seriously, but like BYU was right there.
Based on what they gave us, they would have been. And that's all we can go off of.
Yes. I just Nebraska's I don't understand what the administration's trying to do. They got some fantastic fans. All they want to do is see this team be good again.
Yeah.
And they're getting close, but like they're not running through the first base back. They're trying to stop on it, and they're wondering why they're getting thrown out because momentum's a real thing.
No, like we do talk a lot of trash about Nebraska. I want to be very clear. This has nothing to do with Nebraska fans. I've never actually had a negative interaction with Nebraska fans. I think Nebraska fans are some of the best in college football. I just think that your school is like, as someone who is in this same type of a relationship with the sports team, shouts to the Dallas freaking Cowboys. But I know what it looks like when you're just being abused by the team that you love. And like that's what Nebraska is consistently doing here. Like like the Scott Frost era should have ended before it did. The years of mediocrity before that, you should have never fired Bo Pelini. That should have never been a thing that you even considered at that moment. And like you're in all these different like it's just one constant toxic relationship after another. Now you're finally getting toward a healthy relationship and they just can't help themselves as a program but to be toxic.
Like you can't. I mean, leaving the Big 12 was the worst thing they ever did because it took away their Texas recruiting pipeline,
Hmm.
and they were essentially a top three program in that league. I mean, the Big Eight was them in Oklahoma, and then
Yeah.
obviously you added the four Texas schools of note, and then that became the Big 12. So you're missing out on like a handful of just the growth and opportunity there. You got to basically recruit in Iowa or Minnesota where there's just not as many players. There's nobody really in Nebraska. But I mean, the fans have remained loyal. The fans have remained passionate. They pack that thing to see some terrible
Yeah.
football. You finally get to a point where like you're trying to make the turn, and then you're just not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like I look at Tennessee, who I kind of say is like there's a lot of similarities there with the Volunteers. They had a really awful about 10, 15-year stretch there, maybe closer to about 12 years. They get Heupel, they get Danny White to come in from UCF. And then they to replace what I guess would be no Jeremy Pruitt
Yeah. Good old Pruitt.
Philip Fulmer as the AD there. But you're making all these strides. Like Tennessee is like, yeah, we may lose, but like they've kind of the new playoff format set up perfectly for them. It's like if we just win 10 games, we're going to get in because the clout and the program and the way that we recruit, we're ready. And Nebraska has the potential to be that in the Big Ten, but there's some sort of disconnect that Tennessee is doing that they're not doing.
No, 100%. And you talk about, like Tennessee goes into this game knowing, yeah, we might lose. Like that's what big, well-run college football programs do. Like, do you think Kirby Smart goes into every big game thinking that there's not a possibility, an inkling? Like, he's never going to say that in the locker room. He's never going to say that publicly. But like, as a human being, he goes into every game knowing, yeah, there's a chance we could lose. Like, I'm sure he went into both Texas matchups thinking, yeah, there's a way that Georgia does not win this football game. That's the risk you have to run. And if you're talking about like building a college football playoff resume, quality losses matter, man. Like people talk about it all the time. Like you mentioned the SMU part of it all with BYU. Like that was used to prop up SMU. Like, yeah, before the quarterback change, they were only 2 points worse than BYU. Okay, maybe Nebraska goes in, they lose this game to Tennessee. Maybe Tennessee ends up being a top five team in the country and you played them close. Like that's something that's going to actually be a feather in your cap. Like it just feels and like we're going to talk a little bit more about the second part of this here in just a second. And like in tandem with that, it just feels like a slap in the face in the fans because like you know what I want to see? I want to see Nebraska fans pack it out in Lincoln for Tennessee to come to town and hear how loud that building is. Because I bet that would be one hell of an atmosphere as a fan to watch on TV or to be in the stadium for.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about like two of what probably the six best programs of the 90s, like going at
Yeah.
it. And maybe we're too young to really remember that, but we have just memories of them being really good.
Wear some 90s throwbacks for that game. Like sell some merch from it. Like like you're a marketing guy. Let's market this crap.
I'll have to edit that out. That's good. You caught yourself there, but have Tommy Frazier go out there in a cowboy collar with Corey Schlesinger.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what the people want.
Yes, and then you have what Peyton Manning and Peerless Price out there.
Yeah. T. Martin, the actual national championship
Yeah,
winner at Tennessee.
100%, man. That's what I'm talking about. And as they're doing great, sweetie, we are clearly living in a simulation. Nebraska is one of the handful of programs that's not going to be holding an annual spring game. This just pisses me off. Like you said, it's what? It's it's Texas, it's Ohio State, it's Nebraska, and Florida State, you believe?
And USC. So I guess there are five teams. Yeah. So like that's five programs, five major programs that we've seen cancel their spring game.
Like for me, it comes from a point of I'm trying to think what the word is of God, what's it? It begins with the it's like affluence and it begins with a P or something like that. Privilege, maybe that's it.
Privilege. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you look at all five of those schools, those are all major metro areas where there's things to do. Like these are either state capitals like Austin, Tallahassee, or Lincoln, or then I guess Columbus too, and then Los Angeles. So like
Mhm.
there's stuff to do in all these places. Whereas like some of the lesser programs, like what are you gonna do in Stillwater, Oklahoma? What are you
Yeah.
gonna be doing in Starkville, Mississippi?
Fayetteville, Arkansas,
Like
baby.
you gotta do this like Athens, Georgia, like this is another huge revenue opportunity. These tickets are really expensive. Families can't take like you can't take a family to these games. It's way too expensive. Last year we talked about this when I was across the pond there in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm like, this is how you create new fans, and this just
Yeah.
disappoints me.
No, so I will say the one thing that stands out to me is that Nebraska in this, and like I think it's a it's a good transition from what we just talked about. They're the dragon meme of the week for me when it comes to this because you look at Texas, you look at USC, and I understand USC is down, but you look at every other program. You know what Florida State, Ohio State, Texas, and USC do not have a problem with, and they can just do on their own. Getting money like into the program. Like they make money hand over fist. That's what those programs do. Nebraska makes money, but they're also still playing catch up. They're still trying to make that turn, like you said, as being a program. Spring game and that revenue that you can get from there, that's something you could put into NIL. That's something that you could put towards facilities upgrades. There's so many things you can do, not to mention building more fan support. Like you have a rabid fan base, give them more access to your program, build that excitement, build that, and you're not doing that. So like I think, I think any of these programs taking away the spring game is a slap in the face to the fans. But I think for Nebraska, it's by far the dumbest decision of these five.
Well, also, don't they have the most seasoned starting quarterback at their program at these ones? Because Thomas Castellanos is transferring over from Boston College to Florida State.
Yeah.
Arch Manning at Texas. Jaden Maeva is probably the same sort of thing with
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola, but maybe not to that degree. He did start a little bit at UNLV prior to transferring over.
Right.
And then who else are we missing?
We
Tex
don't know who the
Ohio
Ohio
State.
State quarterback's going to
Yeah,
be.
like Julian Say and Lincoln Kienholz, we don't know. So eh, like some of the best memories. I remember like back in the day they had like a child who had like pediatric cancer was running up and
Yeah.
down and like the team was going like 3-9 every year, but he's out there running. I believe the kid's name was Jack Hoffman, if I'm not mistaken.
If I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to misspeak, I think he recently passed away. So
Yeah.
RIP to Jack Hoffman. But that's like a core memory of college football of like why this sport is it's incredibly dumb, but damn, is it great, man.
Yeah, and it's I go back to it like this is it's one other thing that's just stacking up against Matt Rhule. This is gonna be year three. He forced Marcus Satterfield on people. Didn't work. Hires Daniel Holgerson. Again, that didn't take immediately. We believe in time that will work out with him and Dylan Raiola. But like, this is the year where Matt Rhule, like, you win 10 games. You go to the Sugar Bowl if you're Baylor, or you get fired if you're leading the Carolina Panthers.
He done been fired if he was leading the Carolina Panthers. That was yeah, not cut out for the NFL head coaching ranks. But no, like this is supposed to be an opportunity for Matt Rhule, and it feels like he's bungling a whole hell of a lot of it right now. But like on the grander picture of like canceling spring games, like can you think of any reason why you're doing this? Because I know that publicly, like it's been like, oh, we're worried about our players getting poached and stuff like that. But like that's gonna happen regardless, dude. Like, do you think that these other 133 FBS coaches don't have film on these players? Like, it's readily available to them. Like, I don't. I think that they're hiding behind something, and I don't know what it is. Like, that's what they're using to hide behind, but I don't know what it is they're actually hiding from.
I don't really know. It's yeah, so for spring practice, every program gets 15 a lot of ones, a lot of which make their last or their penultimate one the spring game. They'll televise it on ESPN Plus.
Oh yeah, baby.
This is an opportunity for people to go tailgate, go to the game, go around the town and everything like that. Like Georgia's always going to have one. I would
Yeah.
be utterly shocked, like if they don't. And even if they went on the deep playoff run, like who cares? That's not what Kirby Smart's about. He's going to
Yeah.
do it. I don't know what Bill Belichick's going to do in North Carolina, but I figured that like it would probably be more in the vein of like Colorado, where like, hey, come check out this new thing. This is cool. Be welcoming here. Whereas like the Nebraska one, I do not understand at all.
So I will say something that you just like you talking about Georgia and G Day and like Kirby never canceling that. One thing that is interesting when you think about the five programs that have done this, none of these guys played there at the schools that they're canceling this from. And so, like, I do wonder, like, I agree with you. Kirby would never cancel G Day, but I also think G Day holds a little bit special place in Kirby's heart because he participated in several of those
Right.
as a player. And so, like Ryan Day has no affiliate, like no like it's not the New Hampshire spring game, like he doesn't care.
No,
And like you go through all of this, and it's not maybe it is some of that going on, but I don't know that for a fact. Like that's just me recklessly speculating.
no
But like
that
that is like just thinking about Kirby in the situation.
no, you pulled that all out of your head. So Ryan Day went to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Steve Sarkisian went to BYU. Lincoln Riley kind of coached at Texas Tech because he couldn't play. Uh, Matt Rhule went to Penn State, and then I think Mike Norvell went to Central Arkansas, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah. So like they do not have like direct ties to these programs.
But you do that brings up a good point. Like if this does become more in vogue and it becomes more of a trend, are we looking at a situation where like only the guys who are like after alma mater is going to keep it? Like Mike Gundy will keep it going, Rich Rodriguez will keep it going, Kirby Smart will keep it going.
I think
Uh,
I'll like I don't think it necessarily has to be like you being like homegrown necessarily, but like I have a really hard time seeing Dabo Sweeney ever canceling the Clemson spring
yeah,
game. But like he also comes from, a rich background of where he's come from in tradition and stuff like that. So I do think the background matters, but like you listed off all those programs. Like the only spring game of consequence, like no offense to Texas Tech, but like when at the time Lincoln Riley was there, that wasn't exactly a spring game of consequence. But like BYU and Steve Sarkisian is probably the only spring game of consequence. But at that time, potentially not as well. So like where you come from definitely matters in all of this.
yeah, you kind of wonder with the whole Joe Pyre if that was even really a priority there in State College. Maybe it is now, but
Yeah.
like that's an interesting point here. Again, the fans lose by not having this,
Yeah.
and you I mean, think about it. Like if you're like a rising junior in high school, that time you're like looking for college and you're some friend or family member's like, hey, you want to go see the spring game?
Yeah.
You go check it out. It's like, okay, I'm gonna buckle down and really focus on school for my last semester or two, and then like we'll see if we can get in here.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that goes back to the Nebraska point. Like, you need to get people to Lincoln. You need to get people to see like what this is like why you want to come to Nebraska because like you tell a 17, 18-year-old kid, "Hey, come to the middle of nowhere, Nebraska." Like, it's not going to be the most attractive sell to someone from Texas or, the in the Southeast or anything like that. That's not going to be a big sell for them. And honestly, if you're Lincoln Riley and the way you've been recruiting in the state of California, you probably should be trying to get kids to come to LA and Southern California as well.
I mean, with Nebraska, are you basically banking on like Warren Buffett and Ndamukong Suh bankrolling this thing? I don't know.
I mean, that and Runza, that one of
That
those
runs
three.
311. I don't get near them. Maybe Nick Hexum NIL.
There we go. Yeah.
But he's not driving to a spring game. That would be Carson Beck with some I'm trying Jennifer, better yet, some I'm driving Cavinder. uh this happened this happened late last week, probably shortly after we finished recording Thursday's episode. This is just too good to not talk about.
hmm
So over the weekend, Carson Beck had both of his cars, his Lamborghini and his Mercedes stolen, as well as his girlfriend, who's on the Miami Hurricanes ladies basketball team, Hannah Cavinder, had, I believe, her Range Rover stolen. That was later recovered. I think basically somebody like broke into a parking lot and then like tried to drive it away and then abandoned it is essentially
Yeah.
that level of Grand Theft Auto from what I read about the report follow up for ESPN. But it's kind of funny still.
I mean, it's like no one. It doesn't seem like anyone was hurt in this. It's a harmless crime. I don't think we'd be joking about it if someone had been hurt, but objectively, just hilarious that the Carson Beck moves down to Miami and immediately just falls victim to Grand Theft Auto. Welcome to Vice City, brother.
The last time I laughed about something pertinent to a car this much with college football, you know where I'm going with this. When somebody lit up Brandon Allen's car on fire in
Yeah.
Fayetteville. That was like the early days of like SEC Network, and he was out there like he was actually pretty good for Brett Bielema, like all
Oh
things
yeah.
considered. Obviously, his dad was on the staff. He's like, I just want to play for Arkansas. Arkansas was horrible under Chad Morris, and he's just
Yeah.
like, my car. They just burnt my truck and my truck nuts out of the parking lot. Just burn it.
I mean, real tough scenes. You hate to see it, but also, again, objectively just hilarious. Like, college football fans are true. Like, let me ask you this: do you think the guy who stole the cars? Like, I understand it seems like a random act, but what are the odds that he was a college football fan? That's what I want to know.
Potentially. I mean, I think it's like if it's all three, like you'd have to know who it is.
Yeah,
But I would also kind of be at the point of like how many 20 somethings, 18, 20 somethings have like a Lamborghini and a Mercedes. Like,
right. I
like
mean,
those people.
apparently, everyone at the University of Texas, based on some of the things we've seen on social media, but
I mean that's fair, but it's like it's an easy target sort of
yeah.
thing. Like I wrote about this. I was a little bit more kind of like mean about it. And this has really nothing to do with Beck leaving. Like if he wants to go, that's fine. But like be self-aware enough to recognize that like nobody's rooting for you at this point.
Yeah. And like also no offense to Carson Beck, but he seems a little fish out of watery in Miami just in general. Like that like just in terms of vibe fits, he's a weird fit there. Like he's a good football player, he's a good quarterback. If he comes back healthy, I'm going to be high on Miami. But having said that, like just based on like how he talks, how he handles himself, like he's a weird fit for Miami. And the city too, not just the university.
No, like he's from what I've heard, he's a pretty smart guy. Like did
Yeah.
pretty good in school at Georgia, went to Jacksonville. He's like basically I can go to Georgia or Florida, I just pick.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like I'm not trying to say he's dumb. He just
No.
doesn't seem like I don't know, like I feel like he's the type of guy who would go to like live like the club down there and just be like just standing there with a drink in the middle of the floor, not knowing what to do with his hands. Like that's just kind of the vibe I get from Carson Beck.
He claims he likes is like I don't think you do. That's but like so there's a billboard getting off the exit on 75 North go to my mom's house. And on one side it's Mark Span Real Estate, and the other side it's Morgan to Morgan. So it's just like basically like these two national like
Yeah.
one's doing real estate and one's doing you need a lawyer for your car accident or something like that. And the car accident one was like had Carson Beck up there holding a football and said winners win.
Winners
They
win, baby.
they took it down. They put that Morgan guy's face up there, who's got the most punchable face on earth.
The local like car accident lawyer in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, he looks exactly like Dan Levitard, and I double take every time I see his face on like the side of a bus or something like that. I'm like, Dan, no, never mind, it's the law guy.
But like in Georgia, I mean, you see that like you have John Foy the strong arm, and then you gotta, and I guess maybe like basically anything near I-20, you have Alexander Shinard.
Yeah. That whenever I would be making the trip from North Carolina to Atlanta, from West North Carolina to Atlanta, I would always know I was like getting close when I'd start seeing the John Foy billboards. Like that was like my beacon in the on my way to the promised land.
That's what it's all about. As you take 316 north from Georgia to Athens, everything becomes bulldog bulldog
Oh
very
yeah.
quickly.
Antonio's favorite road, baby.
Yeah, Trace. That's not, he calls it Trace Quince. I'm like, even though it's like one more than Quince. I don't remember. Yes, he says, I think it's how you say it. There we go. That's how you say it. I'm like, I don't, you
Let's
took
be
my shit.
honest, like Spanish is his first language, but really he doesn't have a language. It's just Bulldog.
No, it just, I don't have a language either. But I guess I kind of go back to it with the news of Beck and Cavinder having their cars stolen and everything like that. You're putting a target on your back
Mhm.
by transferring and having all this stuff out there. And even though Coral Gables is essentially a suburb, there's a lot of really poor and desperate people down there in South Florida
Oh
that
yeah.
they don't care. Like I mean, there are a lot of college towns and stuff too in areas. There's a very big price discrepancy, or in terms of what people are pulling in. So if you're seeing some guy driving around in like a bright red Lamborghini or something like that,
Yeah.
people are gonna people are gonna egg it. People don't like seeing other people prosper.
No, they
They get
definitely don't.
jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing to consider in this is like, man, you're giving 18 to 22-year-olds a whole hell of a lot of money, man. And I was recounting my, my ECU trip, and I'm looking back and thinking about it. I have some traffic violation history in my life. Let's just say that, and some issues with my car getting broken into, and it's because I was 18 to 22 years old and I was doing dumb things like, oh, I don't need to lock my car. Who's gonna break into a Chevy Cavalier? Well, apparently like four people, but that's neither here nor there. Like it just happens. People break into cars. That's the world we live in. But
Yeah.
I do think that like you give an 18 to 22-year-old a Lambo, you give them a Range Rover, you give them all the a Mercedes, they could probably still treat it like a Chevrolet Cavalier, man. And that's kind of like you it's kind of the breaks of being an 18 to 22 year old.
For a second there, when he said Chevy Cavalier, I'm like, oh, Cody drove a Crown Vic.
No. It was a beautiful four-door sedan that was yeah, abused very badly.
I'm still abusing the Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo.
Hell yeah, baby.
That thing still goes apparently.
That's right.
But I work from home, so I don't really have to go anywhere.
That's right.
It's great. Any other thoughts about besides I'm driving Cavinder? That's so
Oh
funny.
my God, dude, I'm driving Cavinder. No, that's my
Uh,
prevailing thought is that I'm driving Cavinder.
what do you think the chances are he Snapchatted it? Dude, I got my car stolen. WTF, bro?
There was probably an NSFW follow-up message to somebody out there.
Only you have the ability to make me feel better.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but the good news is like Hannah Cavinder got her car back about as long as the Snapchat exists. So that's really
That's right.
that's really wonderful. But I don't know, I want to see Beck play well. I want to see him be able to like succeed like in the NFL, validate because like he checks the box of like what made Matthew Stafford so good at Georgia and Aaron Murray. He's got some of that, but like it just didn't end the way he wanted to.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think if his elbow doesn't get destroyed, he's going to be a second or third round pick in the draft, and then
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I want to see Beck succeed. Like, I'm going to make jokes at Carson Beck's expense. Do not get me wrong. Like, that's going to happen because I make jokes at everyone's expense. It's an equal opportunity podcast when it comes from me. But having said that, um, I do want him to succeed. And like when I express doubt about Carson Beck, it is not about his ability as a player. It is all about the injury. I'm just worried about what that elbow looks like because we just saw Brock Purdy, who again, not my favorite guy, to be clear, but we just saw Brock Purdy come back from an elbow injury and not look like the same quarterback. So like if that happens to a dude who's still developing, that worries me a little bit.
Give some guy an $8 million NIL valuation, give another guy a 60 million contract extension. This is false start. I think
Yep.
that's a normal possibility. So, but I think when Carson Beck's over there playing Florida State for Miami, he looks over at the sidelines at Shannon Dawson. He goes four. He goes four, and he goes four. So yeah, let's go some 4 for 4
That's
with
right,
our
baby.
penultimate topic here. On the note of I'm driving Cavinder, what Power Four head coach in each league do you think is most likely to have their luxury automobile stolen? Let's
Uh,
start with the ACC.
I gotta tell you, this was the easiest 4 for 4 we've ever done for me. Like
Okay.
I had it locked and loaded. We were ready to go. So ACC, it's Mario. Come on now. We know it's Mario. Mario doesn't know where he parked his car. Do you know where I parked my car? Because he doesn't. He has no
No.
idea. It got stolen like 3 weeks ago. He still hasn't figured it out.
I mean, he's probably got about like three cars that have just made their ways into the Everglades.
Yeah, 100%. Like, have you ever seen the movie Wanderlust with Paul
No.
Rudd and Jennifer Aniston? Would recommend you and the Arizona State podcast settle down for that one. It's got a wonderful Ken Marino cameo in it. It's phenomenal stuff. But at one point, Jordan Peele is also in it, plays a very minor role. But a car ends up in a lake, and he goes, "I laked it. See, it happened, and I went like this, and I don't know, man. And it wasn't even his car, so he laked it."
It's like the time my Gator car got laked working the golf course because the guy bumped into it and knocked it off a tree.
Um,
They were almost mad at me, and I told them what happened. It's like that's totally fair.
yeah, I mean, it happens.
Somebody else saw it happen. He's like, no, John's okay. He was just down there. He was down there weed eating, and this other a-hole just knocked his car into a lake.
It's tough, man. It's real tough.
You know, other people that like it. That's the Brady Quinn AJ Hawk family tree. Just
Hell
like it.
yes. Hell yes.
AJ falls asleep while driving his car, just goes into the lake,
He's always asleep. That's a secret.
and then his kids go in there and start swimming after it.
That's right.
uh, Brady Quinn's got to figure this out. He's like, yeah, my cousin, my brother-in-law just drove it into the lake again.
They start pulling the car out, and Pat McAfee's just standing on it while they pull it out.
Let's go, boys. So for me, because I always do two, so we don't overlap, I did Brent Key because it's Atlanta.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And in terms of people that like they really hate him, I could see people in Tallahassee taking up Mike Norvell's car.
Yeah, that's a statement of protest.
And he's out there, he can't coach. He lost his car, and Gus Malzahn's like, let's go, boys. Let's come on, let's go.
Let's break it down,
Let's
boys.
break it down, boys. Gus Malzahn's definitely the type of guy who drives like a 90s like BMW or like a Mercedes and takes really good care of it.
Oh yeah, either that or like I could see him being a Saab guy, like an old school
Get
Saab.
you a Gus Saab there down at Saab country there in a Panhandle Chevrolet or something.
Exactly.
Let's go, boys. We'll throw in a free bologna sandwich with you.
Ex-
uh, Big Ten. Where are you leaning with this?
Big Ten, I went pretty easy for me again. Kirk Ferentz, man. He's from a different era. You leave your car unlocked. You don't have to worry about all these people. Yeah, you do, Kirk. You do, but he refuses to change, and so he just keeps getting his car stolen.
He drives the same Astro van he used to take Brian to practice, and they don't have automatic doors. They got the roll up stuff because like he's afraid of legging it, and Brian can't get out otherwise.
Yeah,
Just child locks in the back seat.
look, a fair point for all at every turn.
That's great. I went with Ryan Day because I think people out there still hate him. They'll take his car.
Oh yeah, 100%.
They'll put it in the Olatanji, and it's like still floating.
Oh yeah.
And then after canceling Tennessee and the spring game, I could see them taking Matt Rhule's car and stealing it.
Yeah, 100%.
uh, they take you to the Runza and they basically just like they just burn it.
It's Dirty Mike and the boys, and I'll leave it there.
It's been a wild ride. I wouldn't change a minute. Nick,
Oh God.
Nick Hexum and Peanut just walk out with the Runza and they're like, dude, what the hell is this? Oh my God. Big 12.
Big 12, you know when it's hard to protect your automobile when you're shaking babies and kissing hands, baby. 'Cause that's Joey McGuire. He's got too many other things, too many other irons in the fire to worry about his car's safety. So yeah, Joey McGuire.
That's totally fair. And and that'll be the day that I die in Lubbock, Texas.
Right.
Um, yeah. Though if they try, we saw them turn on Chris Beard, they can turn on anybody.
100%.
Mike Leach too.
They did indeed. Oh, yeah,
Uh,
never mind. I almost went off the rails, and I'm not going to do
no, no.
it.
And Craig James' team doesn't play in the Big 12 anymore, but
Yep.
Deion Sanders' team sure does. I mean, he got like a phone stolen and made a big deal about that in Jackson, Mississippi. I could see him doing the same thing in Boulder, Colorado.
For sure.
And then again, I think people are not going to not everybody in Morgantown likes the Rich Rodriguez hire. I could see them doing it too, like burning
Yeah.
it like a couch, just pushing it down the street.
With Dion, I could see it being more of a like a joyride type of situation, not like malicious, just like, hey, it'd be really great. Like, I mean, let's be clear, it's Boulder, Colorado. There are some extracurricular activities that happen frequently in Boulder, Colorado, and someone's just like, hey, it'd be hilarious right now if we took Deion Sanders' like Mercedes for a little joyride or his Rolls Royce.
Put your mouth on this exhaust pipe, bro. It's gonna take you to the next level, bro.
Exactly.
Shout out to Deion Sanders buying Andre Nozik's apartment there in Chicago.
We really appreciate it. Dirty Randy already has
Dirty.
fingerprints all over it.
And we're not going to talk about MLA here, but we're going to talk about some SEC to finish this up.
Bro, it's Eli Drinkwitz. Like he's just an easy target. I don't know what else to tell you. It's Eli Drinkwitz. He like A, he probably forgets where he parks every single day. B, like it's an assigned space drink. You're in the same spot every single day. Forgets every single time. Not only that, he just seems so erratic that he just like gets mad at something and like just like gets like swindled. Like it's not a typical car stealing thing that we're talking about here. It's not Grand Theft Auto. It's like a Nigerian prince scheme. Like I'm a Nigerian prince. I need your car for the day, and Dream gives it to him.
I love that. We went in a completely different direction for all these. So my first is this is the first one I thought of, Brent Venables. I think
Yeah.
he'd be in a hurry and double park between a handicap space and a regular space. And then, some Oklahoman man's just like, nah. He takes like his monster truck and like just drives on top of it, parks on top of his car, or they just tow it out of the way. I figured that like there's somebody in Norman's like, you know what? I've dealt with this before. We use this to move cattle, but we can move cars.
Yeah, 100%.
And the guy that I would feel really bad about where I think this could happen to would be Billy Napier. He's like, he shows at a press conference like, oh, over the weekend I lost my car. Just don't know where it is. Can you just help me find it, please?
Just bad luck Billy down there in Gainesville, man. It happens.
He's not run down a dream. He's run down to find out where his car is because you don't know how it feels to be Billy.
Drink is also the type of guy like in the replacements where he comes out and like there's a group of angry Mizzou fans and they flip his car and he's like, "Thanks, guys," and he like Keanu, he hits the lock button before he goes in the facility.
I will survive. Is really all I got to
That's
say.
right.
I can't wait to do the replacements. The replacements. This is going to be
Yeah,
a
dude, it's
hell
gonna
of
be
a
good stuff.
moving on to our final topic here. We're going to finish with some. I'm trying to remember what the heck did I put on there? Oh yeah, TIN 10. Yes, we need a
10.
10. We needed a topic to finish the show up there. And Josh Pate posed the question there on X saying, what are the top 12 programs in college football today, which is where I took it. And we'll do it with 10. We'll work our way down from 10 to 1. And this will be fun. We made really good time last time, but
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you this before we get into our list. Like, did you like Pate? I looked at his list and like to see like what criteria he used and stuff like that, and didn't really use his because it's Pate. He always has like his own formulas that he uses, but he used like a 4-year running out average of like talent acquisition and things like that. What things did you consider when trying to make your list?
I considered overall team success in recent years number one. I considered winning tradition historically two, and I've also considered like recruitment relative and like sending talent to the next level. Like you basically like we're gonna win. You're gonna come here. You're gonna win. We're gonna develop you. You're gonna have a football career beyond just playing college.
So I definitely took those things into consideration. One thing that I kept considering and like was almost like my tiebreaker for a lot of these was floor. Who has the highest floor? Like, can I imagine a program like we'll get there, but like where I have Michigan, I had Michigan higher initially, and then I thought about this past year, and I'm like, I'm not sure the floor is as high as we have with these other programs. So like maybe the ceiling is just as high, but I'm not sure the floor is just as high. And it's like I think when you're talking about program, like what you look like when you're bad is the sign of a good program, or when you're not at your peak efficiency, I should say.
Sucks for Florida State.
Yeah, yeah, not
uh,
great. They didn't.
no,
They let me be clear. With that tiebreaker, Florida State's not in the top 10. Sorry about
no, no, they weren't even like my first
it.
two out. So for 10 for me, I settled on LSU at 10.
I also settled on LSU as 10.
My thought is they recruit at a very high level. They're the only Power Four school in state. They have other schools in state, but like Tulane's close, but not quite.
Yeah,
They have plenty of winning tradition. They can recruit. My thing is like, I just don't think that they win enough.
yeah. I mean, like to exactly what I was just talking about with that floor discussion. We've seen the bottom somewhat drop out from LSU, and like when you talk about these other programs, that of the teams that I have in this top 10, LSU is by far the most volatile. And like they're such an interesting case study when you consider them as a program because at their like they have probably the best college football team that we've seen in the past 20 years, if not longer, if not all time in 2019. Like
Yeah.
the ceiling is the elite of the elite. And in terms of producing NFL talent, in terms of talent acquisition, they have no issues there. They have a like Jaden Daniels is not only a Heisman Trophy winner that was just there 2 years ago, but now he's also Rookie of the Year in the NFL. Now he's also leading the Commanders to the NFC Championship game his first year. Like LSU has a proud tradition. They're like you said, they're just not as good as they should be sometimes.
No, but I put them ahead of 11 and 12, which in order I had was Tennessee and Utah. Those are the
Okay.
other ones. I thought Tennessee is very similar to LSU, but the deciding factor is I think LSU has more talent, more longer winning tradition, whereas Tennessee's really had about it was down for a while there,
Mhm.
whereas LSU has been mostly good for the 21st century. Utah has been really good for most of the 21st century, but again, it's a very low ceiling.
Yeah, and I had Tennessee at 12 as well. And when I look at Tennessee, my big thing that I come away with is the ceiling. Like we haven't seen Tennessee reach the same, even nearly the same ceiling that we know LSU has.
Right. So LSU, same sort of thing. Who'd you have at 9?
And nine, I have Penn State, and it's kind of a different conversation because they don't necessarily have the ceiling, but man, that floor is high, bro. Like that, we joke about James Franklin being the driver at 10-2. Hell, man, if you're gonna win 10, get 10 games every single year you're at a program pretty damn consistently, like that deserves credit. That deserves recognition. Like that's not easy to accomplish.
No, that's what Mark Georgia was. That's why Georgia was been a top 10 program pretty much throughout most 21st century. So it's
Yeah.
the same sort of thing. I have Penn State at 8.
Okay.
At 9, I have Michigan.
Okay. Okay. I have Michigan a little higher than you.
Yes, my thing is Michigan is again a little bit, they're very, very high ceiling. A lot of floor, probably I would say of any team in here offers the greatest variance.
Hmm.
And that's a challenge. You can go 15 and 0. You can also go 7 and 5. And right now, like, while I do think things get better under Sharon Moore in year two, if they don't, I'm really scared for this program.
And I think that's completely fair. I'll give my Michigan thoughts in a little bit. I don't want like I have them a little bit higher. They're not at 8. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
at eight
Yeah.
I have Oregon, and Oregon was the hardest team for me to place in these rankings because I know what Oregon seems to be trending toward. I know what Oregon. I have a lot of faith in Dan Lanning. I think Oregon in the next 5 to 10 years is going to get over the hump and win a national championship. I truly believe that with the way things are trending. Things got to change though because you haven't really been that close yet. And so like that's why I kind of settled them at like the back part of this top 10 is I see where it's going. I'm high on where it's going, but you're not quite there yet.
I have Oregon a little bit higher, but they're firmly in this list. They always were going to. So at 8, I have Penn State. I feel
Yeah.
that they're not recruiting at the level as some of the higher ones up here. This past year was tremendous for them in terms of being able to finally make the playoff, win a couple of games, get the proverbial monkey off your back here. I think they've got a fantastic coaching staff. I think that will help elevate James Franklin even more. But again, I think it's kind of like they got to show it to me. Like, can you beat a top 5 team?
Yeah.
Can you beat someone who might be better than you? And like at that point, it's hard for me to see like everything feels like it almost has to break their way for Penn State to win a national championship, which right now I'm kind of leaning towards that
Yeah.
because I think they just have the coaching talent and experience advantage over pretty much everybody else.
Yeah.
But like you got to make it happen. So that's why I've got Penn State at 8.
No, and I think that makes perfect sense. I think our logic is similar, and we're only one spot apart on them. So I think we're right. We see Penn State very much the same.
Yes. Who do you have at 7?
At 7, I'm going Clemson. I don't feel great about it because Clemson's floor, I do think, has always been and will continue to be exceptionally high. At the same time, when we're talking about right now, we haven't seen the same ceiling for Clemson as of late. We know what Clemson's ceiling was 6 years ago ish, but they're not at that level. They might be getting back, but we haven't seen it recently. So Clemson gets penalized a little bit for that if we're talking about right now what they are. Like they're just a little bit behind the 8 ball there.
I have Clemson at 7 as well. It's
Awesome.
like, yeah, we're feeling kind of on the same sort of wavelength for the most part.
Yeah.
It's like the floor is incredibly high. Your floor is going to be 8-4.
Yeah.
I do think that there are recruiting. I don't know if it's limitations or disadvantages. I feel it's like you can get people in,
Yeah.
but you're also pulling from the same sort of. You're pulling also from the same area that South Carolina is doing and Georgia. It's the same thing where Tennessee is like you got to be a little bit more national because everybody's going in on your territory. The problem with the Clemson is like, they just the very old school way of doing it. It's like it's a committable offer. Like if you're offered, you have to accept it or you don't have one. You
Yeah.
can't you can't transfer out of from another school for the most part. I feel like that puts them back. I think everybody else that's above them and probably everybody else behind them doesn't put that stringent of maybe Michigan a little bit more academically because it could
Yeah.
be harder to get into, and maybe that's why I had them further down. But okay, Clemson's just taking care of business in the ACC. They could play the SEC and they'd fit it right in. It'd be just fine.
Agreed. 100%.
6.
6 is where I have Michigan. And I think that, yes, the 2024 season under Sharon Moore did have some signs like, yeah, you need to like get this back to somewhere close to the level that Harbaugh had it. At the same time, it's a team that still pretty comfortably made a bowl game. It's a team that still beat Ohio State. And the fact that you're able to lose everything that Michigan did, be under the pressure and scrutiny from the NCAA that Michigan currently is, and you're still able to do that pretty comfortably with a roster that all anyone did the entire season was talk a whole lot of smack about Michigan's roster, and you still won 8 games, you still beat Ohio State. Like when you start to break it down like that, this program's in a pretty good spot. Again, they are a little bit volatile because if Sharon Board does not figure this thing out, then yes, they're going to drop out of this top 10 100%. But they also did just win a national championship 2 years ago. So, it's hard for me to have them any lower than this,
Ask yourself this: is there any other school that's going to have more people draft the first round this year than Michigan? They're going to have 4 players taken the first round.
which is crazy. Like
Yeah,
you're still able to turn that over in like your down year.
like Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Kenneth Grant, and Colson Loveland. Like those are all going to be first round picks.
Hmm.
Like Georgia's got 3.
Yeah.
I don't even like Ohio State's maybe got 3 or 4. I don't even really know anybody else who is close.
See, Ohio State would have Simmons, Igbuka, Sawyer.
Yeah, JTT probably not, but yeah.
JTT, yeah, JTT is probably day 2. So Ohio State, see, Georgia's got Walker, Walker.
Well, Walker, cousin Michael, and Malachi Starks,
Yeah, okay. So,
and then Penn State's got Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter. I don't know if they've got a third guy.
ooh, no, they do not have a third guy, but I will say, Ohio State could get 4 if Tyleik Williams goes back into the first round.
Right.
I think that's possible.
Yeah, but like I was saying, like Michigan's like clearly
Yeah,
got
no, 100%. The fact
yeah
that we're in that conversation is crazy.
I like that. My thing is Sharon Moore. That's and then the sanctions and stuff like that
Yeah.
too. And also there was a point there where Michigan was really bad.
Yeah, no, 100%. But we're talking about, where we are right now. And where we are right now, Michigan's pretty healthy.
Yes. Number 6 for me is Notre Dame.
Okay, okay.
I feel of any program on here, I think that they know exactly who they are more than anybody else.
Yeah,
They um they know they got to recruit nationally because there's not a lot of people in Indiana. It's stringent academics, cold part of the region. don't have a lot of Catholic overtones. You have to basically be national. You got to go, hit the Catholic pipeline, get people from like the Rust Belt and the Midwest, really just anywhere. But they've got a head coach who knows what it is. He's making it cool. The players who go there, they still continually get players drafted pretty high. They're a regular part of the playoff. I would say in the playoff era, they're a top 6, 7 program all time. Like in this era, they've been consistent there. They've undergone a major coaching change. It hasn't really been pivoted off. There is the ceiling is like maybe a one-off national championship, but like floor is pretty high.
No, I have Notre Dame pretty high, a little bit higher than this. So I agree with all your sentiments, and I'll unpack that a little bit more here shortly.
Yes. And who do you have at 5?
At five is where I have Alabama, and let me explain, I guess, because I'm sure some people are going to be pissed that I have Alabama at number five. But down in the early 2010s, in late 2000s, there was no more dominant program. Like Alabama's number one on this list with a bullet under Nick Saban. As college football started to change, and one of the reasons that Nick Saban retired, which he would admit, is the fact that college football has changed. And I don't think it was Nick Saban taking his ball and running home. I just don't think he can be as dominant as he was in this new era of college football. I just think it has changed, and Alabama doesn't have the advantages that they once did in the way with the way the modern college football has changed in the landscape with NIL, the transfer portal, and all things of this nature. Like you can't just hoard the talent in the same way because that talent is just going to hit the portal the next year and leave if they don't play, if they don't get the opportunities that you want. That was always Alabama's superpower. They don't have that superpower anymore. Now you lose your other superpower, which was Nick Saban, and you have Caleb DeBoer, who we have plenty of questions about. Like last year to me for Alabama, the more I think about it, the more it looked disjointed. The more it looked like there wasn't everyone pulling in the same direction. Maybe as DeBoer gets his hands on like the recruiting more heavily and starts to build his program and his image, maybe that changes. But right now, I'm not sure that happens, and I'm not sure that works at Alabama, frankly. So like with what we've seen and how we've seen college football change, Alabama is still one of the top five programs in college football. I don't think like anyone who would say otherwise, I don't think they're watching the sport correctly, frankly. At the same time, I do think that there are worrying signs that they are not the elite of the elite that they once were.
And that'll be reflected on where I have Alabama. So I have Oregon at 5 and Alabama at 4.
Okay, okay.
I believe Oregon is closer to trending up, or like they're approaching the asymptote of what their ceiling is, which I think is a one-off national championship. They've never won a national championship. They've been to, I think, two. Yeah,
Yeah,
because they lost to Ohio State in 14, then they lost to Auburn in 10.
you're right.
So like we know like they could essentially get there. Oregon's recruiting really well on like a national scope. Again, they don't have a lot of players in state. They mostly got to go to Northern California. They got to use the uniforms to sell that to impressionable people. I'd rather just win
Yeah.
personally.
Winning's cool,
Um,
man. Winning does a lot of
so
things, good things for you.
and you have the Nike money there with, and then I mean that's what they're going to use like whatever's going on there with Beaverton with Adidas, but like there's apparel stuff. There's intrigue there as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I got Oregon. I Bama at 4 because like I just feel the infrastructure like this is why like I get so frustrated with Kalen DeBoer. He's like our kind of guys, and I'm like
Yeah.
your kind of guys are 5 stars.
Yeah. Your kind of
Uh,
guys are the guys that are going to go to the NFL. That's what your kind of guys are.
yes, I understand that Birmingham is not Atlanta, and I understand that you are sharing a state with a traditionally a top 15 program all time in Auburn that is just as good and just as competitive. We know what Auburn's capable of.
Yeah.
Auburn's incredibly volatile. When we were growing up, Alabama was not good. Alabama,
No.
like uh, basically like our entire like childhood, Alabama was not good.
No, it took until the invention of like the widespread not the invention, but like the widespread like parts of the internet for me to realize like why people respected Alabama as like a great program. Because like I like growing up we had no idea because we didn't see it. That was not great Alabama football. There was a down period and they had to get back to where they got to.
So like, but that's my thing with Alabama is like I just think that the 3 teams I have above them, there's more going for it in state in terms of being able to put capital investment. They're just as passionate about it. I just kind of feel that like there's a little bit of a limitation there in terms of I don't even know if reach is the word, but like there's something that the other 3 teams I have ahead of them that Alabama does not quite have.
I agree with you completely.
So at four, who do you have at four?
At four is where I have Notre Dame.
Okay.
And my thought process is I don't think the ceiling is as high as Alabama. I truly don't. I don't think the ceiling is as high as the three programs I have ahead of Notre Dame. However, what I do think about Notre Dame is that they're running at peak efficiency. I don't think there's a better run program. Like you said, they know who they are and they know what they have to do. And I think Marcus Freeman is running that to perfection. Like you're recruiting the best talent that you can get into Notre Dame. They are consistently doing that, and I firmly believe that. But on top of that, they also have one of the best player development systems in the country. Like Notre Dame consistently produces NFL talent despite not having the five-star pipeline of Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State. Like they're consistently developing these guys into being NFL talents. And then the fact that, in recent years, particularly under Marcus Freeman and under Brian Kelly in a lot of ways as well, that floor is very high. That floor, you're never going to have you're going to have Notre Dame head scratchers because that's become something that we just have to expect at this point. But in terms of like a consistently bad team, a team that's going 6-6, we don't really see that from Notre Dame anymore. And I think it's because of how this program is running at such high efficiency.
I think that's an interesting point. Like you think that just Notre Dame's just a better operation right now than Alabama.
Yeah.
They've surpassed them. And I think that that's fair. Like I was sitting there thinking like we're gonna have the same top four. And I'm like, nah, maybe there's a slight variation there. But I
Yeah.
think that that's yeah, that's it just kind of shows like who you have leading your program really, really matters.
It really does. It really does.
So I'm just gonna say it. We have the same three teams in probably possibly the same order, different order, between Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas, I would say is our top three.
Correct. Yes, I did not throw a major curveball and leave one of those
No,
out. Or no, I
no,
can't quite do that.
no. So at three, I have Texas. I have
I also
Texas,
have Texas at three.
and I think the big thing is like, look, academics, they're all relatively the same. It's good, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Major major college football rich states, and you have major conferences, finances, you can pretty much get whatever you want. Like the ceiling is you can be dynastic at these three places is
Yeah.
essentially where I've gotten at. And I don't necessarily think that it's that Texas has not done it just yet, even though Georgia and Ohio State have won recently. I think that may play a part in how you assess this. But like
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is I think that, for lack of a better word, I think Ohio State and Georgia fans are just a little bit more crazy than Texas fans. They're a
That's
little
probably
more
fair. That's
they're
probably fair.
they're a little more demanding, and I
Yeah.
think that like for lack of a better word, they'd go for the kill more. I think Texas could be a little bit they could be like, okay, maybe like they blink for a second and then Georgia gets ahead of them or something like that. I also think that Texas moving into the SEC, there's going to be some kinks that have to be worked out at some point where I think Georgia just has been in the SEC since it existed. Same with Ohio State and the Big Ten. Like they know their environment a little better. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
So I think some of what you're describing plays into you accurately predicted. Yes, Texas hasn't done it and Georgia and Ohio State have. Like that's honestly was my first reason like when I first did this. But as I'm reassessing things and seeing if I need to move things around, what I really came down to why that's the case is it feels like because of where Texas was prior to Steve Sarkisian's arrival, that currently it almost feels as if the fan base in the program is a little unsure of its success. It feels like not unfamiliar territory, but like we don't know exactly like how to act being here. Ohio State and Georgia know how to act because they're always here. And
Yeah.
like Texas feels like we know Texas of previous iterations. They knew what to do here. You went with Vince Young and you won a national championship. You upset USC to win a national championship. You disrupt a dynasty. Well, guess what you're gonna have to do again to do that? You're gonna have to disrupt a dynasty, whether that's Ohio State, whether that's Georgia. You're gonna have to disrupt the dynasty to get back to that point again. And until they do that, they're gonna be a step behind, in my opinion.
Yeah, even if we both probably pick Texas to win the SEC next year, like
Yeah,
that's what has to happen.
yeah, you gotta prove yourself, man.
All right. So I'll go. I'll get my 2-1. And I'll explain like where it's very close between
Oh yeah, it's
Georgia
splitting hairs, brother.
and Ohio State. At two, I have Georgia, and
Okay.
I have Ohio State at one. My reasoning for this is I firmly believe that. Well, I think Ohio State just has a little bit better NIL. Like just they're a little bit further ahead in the game. I understand that Governor Kemp is trying to basically make it where like you're the NIL for any University of Georgia or public school Georgia student like who's they can they're not get taxed for it, like
Hmm.
state income tax. I think the biggest thing is I think the gap between Ohio State and their next biggest competitor, the teams that they're fighting for in the same region, whether that would be, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, historically, maybe Michigan State,
Hmm.
they're not quite in the same vicinity. Whereas Georgia's like, okay, we got to deal with Alabama, we got to deal with Clemson, we got to deal with Florida, FSU. I just think that
Yeah.
it's more hotly contested there in Atlanta as like a battleground for getting players, and I feel like that's probably the biggest thing. And also historically, I think Ohio State's got a better winning tradition.
Hmm.
And like Ohio State's before this exercise, like Ohio State's was the best program of all time. And Georgia is probably like seven or something like that. And then
Right.
the things have changed. So that's why I settled on those two.
Yeah, so I have the same order. I have Ohio State at one and I have Georgia at two. A lot of the same reasons you described, I think, are part of my thought process. I think if I had to boil it down to like simply, I think that just about anyone could have success at Ohio State. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Georgia, at least to the level that Kirby Smart does. Like I don't even mean this as a disparaging remark to Ryan Day, which it's gonna come off as, let me be clear about that, but I don't mean this, but like I feel like there's a lot of I feel like more than 50% of FBS coaches could have won a national championship last year with Ohio State. I truly believe that. I think that roster was just that damn good. And that's kind of the talent acquisition business like you're talking about with the NIL. Like Ohio State is a well-oiled machine that almost runs itself. Like we can talk about, do we like the Brian Hartline offensive coordinator hires? Do we like, bringing in a co-OC or promoting a co-OC? Like all these moves that we're making at the end of the day, Ohio State's still going to have really damn good players, and that's going to win a lot of football games. Like you're probably going to win 10 or 11 games, regardless of if you're a flawed team or not. Georgia, we've seen the Mark Richt era. That's still pretty fresh in our memories. Like we know what it looks like to have a guy who maybe just doesn't have what it takes to get them over the hump to where Kirby Smart has gotten them. And so, like when I'm looking at that, and I'm talking about programs, and I'm talking about splitting hairs between these two, and you're starting to dig for these things, the fact that I've seen Georgia kind of like it feels bad to even say like be bad because they weren't bad. Like let's be clear, they were never bad football teams under Mark Richt, but not be the elite of the elite, not be a national championship contender every year. We don't really see that with Ohio State. We haven't seen that in a very long time with what they've been able to do.
I think you bring up a good point. It's the coaching thing. So in this thought exercise, see following along with this. Let's take the last three head coaches of note at each school and you
Yeah,
flip them. So in this case, Georgia's Kirby Smart, Mark Richt, and Jim Donnan. How many
yeah,
of them won national championships at Ohio State?
Kirby Smart.
Kirby Smart, yeah, and Jim Donnan won them at Marshall when they were at FCS. But so like, but
Yeah,
it's but then it's like, well, Jim Tressel did that at Youngstown State.
yeah, and then
So,
did
but
it at Ohio State.
but then if you take Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day, how many of them win national titles at Georgia?
I think I would give it to Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel. Like I think both of them could do it. I'm not sure Ryan Day wins a national championship at Georgia.
Okay, so that yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. The infrastructure is just a little bit more. Ohio State's the only program that's never been bad.
Yeah, I mean it's true. Like it's truly remarkable. And one of the reasons why, like, quite frankly, like why we sometimes have a negative tone when we talk about Ohio State, because like it's the same reason people had a negative tone with the Patriots under the Belichick Brady era. Like if you're not an Ohio State fan, if you're not a Patriots fan, brother, it gets tired, man. Like I want to see this team like have to go through what I, especially as a North Carolina fan. Let me tell you, I've seen some bad damn football. Like I want to see other fans have to deal with the same pain I do.
Yeah, I think just Ohio State's never been bad.
Yeah,
Like Georgia was bad or Georgia was mediocre in the 90s is probably the
yeah,
best way to say it.
yeah,
Like we've seen, I mean, a lot of these other ones, Alabama was mediocre in the 90s and 2000s.
right.
Uh, Clemson mediocre in the 2000s.
Yeah,
LSU, what was LSU before the 90s? Like, were they any good? Not really.
nah.
Uh, yeah, like everybody else on here, Penn State is probably the only other one, but they've had scandal. But
Yeah, and like also they don't have they ha in the past 30 years they haven't shown the same upside as Ohio State. So like Penn State and Ohio State like they're definitely mirror images of each other. It's just like Penn State's mirror is a little bit like smudgy.
no, and then like you look across the board, Oregon, what were they before Mike Bellotti? Like, not
Yeah.
really good. It's
Yeah.
Texas, we've dealt with them being bad recently. Tennessee, we've dealt with them being bad
Yeah,
recently.
we've seen that. That is fresh in the memory.
It's as fresh as the chocolate pudding and Jesse and Jester. God, I couldn't even say it. Jesse and Chester's locker. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was episode 153 of Fall Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow Cody Williams at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB Fall Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. We got 2 and 3. That's how we do it. Savvy fives.
That's right.
I don't know, like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
oh man, good to see you there, Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Also, while we're here, we have 2 new subscribers that aren't private, and so we can actually shout them out over the past week that have subscribed. So, shouts to Sean Morgan and Daniel Ekman. We appreciate the support. You're starters for life now. We'll send you instructions on where to get the tattoo.
Yeah, I know it's yeah, you have to go by yourself. No one else is looking. You have to wear it back over your head.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's like being a Browns fan in the mid 2000s.
Uh, um, don't drive with a brown bag over your head just because you play for the Browns, Carson Beck. And this is false start.